Medieval homes were built on mud, smoke, and tar, and somehow the wood never rotted. The secret is a three-step treatment almost nobody bothers with today. Picture this: a medieval farmhouse in a damp European valley, timber frame sunk into centuries of fog, rain, and snow. The plaster has been patched, the thatch has been replaced more than once, but the heavy oak beams above the hearth are original. 7 centuries of smoke, feasts, arguments, births, and funerals have happened under that same dark, glossy wood. It is still solid. No softness under a knife, no punky corners, no hidden rot when you drill into it. Now cut to a modern home improvement store. Rows of bright, greenish, pressure-treated lumber advertised for outdoor decks and fences. You know the story here. 10, maybe 15 years later, you're back in the same aisle, replacing posts that turned to sponge where they met the soil, handrails that check and split, and boards that grew mold in their first winter. How is it that people with no electricity, no plastic wraps, and no industrial preservatives could build in wetter conditions than most suburbs, yet leave behind wood that is still structurally sound after 400, 600, even 800 years, while modern treated lumber fails in a decade or two? In this video, the plan is simple. First, show what actually causes wood to rot and why modern solutions often make the problem worse. Then step through the exact sequence medieval builders used, from how they chose the tree, to when they cut it, how they seasoned it, how they burned it, what they rubbed into it, and how they designed houses around it, to turn vulnerable timber into something close to rot-proof. Finally, look at which parts of that system you can realistically borrow today if you want your own projects to last. This is not about nostalgia for some romantic Middle Ages. It is about ruthless practicality, understanding why their wood-outlived empires and why yours struggles to survive a mortgage cycle. Section 1. What rot really is. Before getting into secrets, it is worth being honest about the enemy. Wood does not rot because time passes. It rots because a whole ecosystem sees it as food. Fungi send hyphae into the wood, digesting the cellulose and lignin that make it stiff and strong. Insects follow the softened pathways, tunneling and chewing. Bacteria help break down sugars and starches. These organisms need 3 things to thrive: moisture, available nutrients, and oxygen. Take away any one of those for long enough, and decay slows dramatically or stops. Modern construction often accidentally gives them the perfect buffet. Boards are cut from fast-grown trees with wide growth rings and lots of sugary sapwood. They are installed still relatively wet, sealed behind plastic paints or impermeable membranes. When those seals crack, water gets in but cannot get back out. The result is a damp, oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich environment. Exactly what fungi dream about. Medieval builders, by contrast, were obsessed with making wood a terrible place for decay organisms. Their treatment starts long before a board ever sees a brush of tar or oil. It begins in the forest itself. Section 2. The first treatment: choosing the right tree. If you look at surviving medieval beams, furniture, and church roofs, a pattern jumps out immediately. They privileged species and parts of the tree that are naturally hostile to rot. Hardwoods like oak, chestnut, and some pines contain extractives, tannins, resins, and other compounds that are naturally toxic or unattractive to fungi and insects. The dense, dark heartwood at the center of an older tree is especially resistant. Sapwood, the pale outer ring that used to carry water and nutrients, is softer, full of sugars, and rots quickly. Guild carpenters did not have microscopes or lab reports, But they had something just as powerful: centuries of observation, recorded in treatises and passed down by apprenticeship. They knew that dark, heavy boards from the heart of slow-grown trees survived, while light, soft boards with big, fast rings did not. So they made brutal choices modern mills would call wasteful. They simply threw away most of the sapwood. A medieval carpenter might discard half a log by volume to keep only the heart. To them, that was not waste. That was insurance. They were building in an age where replacing a beam meant tearing open a wall by hand, not calling a contractor with power tools. Overbuilding in durability was cheaper than rebuilding after failure. Section 3. Timing the harvest. Winter felling. Even the same tree can produce very different timber depending on when it is cut. Medieval and early modern sources repeatedly recommend felling in the dormant season, midwinter, when the sap is down. In winter, deciduous trees like oak pull a large share of their sugars and moisture back into the roots. The standing wood has lower sap content and fewer nutrients available for fungi. Cutting then means the freshly felled timber starts with one strike against decay, less food inside the cells. Winter-cut timber also shrinks more predictably as it dries because the seasonal moisture variation is smaller. That matters for joinery. If beams twist and warp violently, joints open, water sneaks in, and rot gets a foothold. Medieval builders watched hillsides and valleys for decades, learning which stands of trees, on which slopes, produced straight, tight-ringed winter oak with minimal warp. So the first piece of the rot-proof treatment is not a chemical at all. It is a calendar and a ruthless selection standard, the right species, the right part of the tree, at the right time of year. Section 4. Patience. Air seasoning and water seasoning. Freshly felled wood is saturated with water. If you rush to use it, two bad things happen. First, as it dries in place, it shrinks unevenly, cracking, cupping, and pulling joints apart. Second, high internal moisture in an enclosed structure invites fungi during that vulnerable first year. Medieval builders solved both problems with patience. The standard method was air seasoning. Logs were converted into beams or planks and stacked in open sheds with roofs but no walls, protected from rain but open to moving air. Layers of timber were separated by small sticks, stickers, so that air could circulate on all sides. The stacks were raised off damp ground on stones or timbers. The rule of thumb, already mentioned by early technical writers, was roughly 1 year of drying per inch of thickness. A 1-inch board might season for a year. A thick oak beam might sit for several years before it became part of anyone's house. That meant projects were planned over long horizons. An apprentice might season wood he would never personally install. For particularly demanding applications, builders sometimes took the paradoxical step of soaking wood in water before drying it, a method known later as water seasoning. Logs were sunk in rivers, ponds, or special basins for months or years. Immersion washes out water-soluble sugars and starches, depriving fungi of easy food. It also equalizes moisture through the log, reducing internal stress. Archaeological evidence shows ancient and medieval piles, like those under Venice, benefiting from such long soaks in low-oxygen water. Then, after this extended bath, the wood was hauled out and slowly air-dried. The result was timber with fewer nutrients for rot organisms and a more stable internal structure. To modern eyes, waiting years for boards to dry looks extravagant. To them, it was simply the foundation of anything meant to last. Section 5. Making the surface hostile. Fire and char. Even perfectly seasoned wood is still organic. Medieval builders added another layer of protection by deliberately burning it. The technique was simple but precise. The outer surface of a beam, fence post, or siding board was lightly charred over open flame. Craftsmen worked quickly, rotating the piece until it gained a thin, uniform blackened layer, then quenched the fire and brushed away loose soot. They did not burn deep into the wood. The goal was to create a shallow, carbonized skin. Carbonized wood is less appetizing to fungi and insects than raw wood. The char layer also reduces liquid water absorption and gives a sacrificial surface that weathers away slowly, protecting the intact wood beneath. Similar methods exist in Japanese shu-sugi-ban practices, where charred siding can last decades with minimal maintenance. Historical sources and experiments show that medieval and later European builders especially used this on the most vulnerable parts: the ends of fence posts that went into the ground, sill beams near soil, and sometimes exterior cladding in harsh climates. Instead of treating every piece equally, they strategically armored the points of first attack. Fire alone is not perfect. Deep cracks in char can still admit moisture, so they used the charred surface as the ideal base for their next ingredient: pine tar and oils. Section 6. The chemical armor: pine tar, linseed oil, and wax. In an age without synthetic preservatives, medieval and early modern craftsmen still built a surprisingly sophisticated chemical defense system from natural materials. The core ingredients show up again and again in accounts and experiments: pine tar or wood tar, made by heating resin-rich wood slowly in low oxygen so it decomposes into a thick, aromatic liquid rich in resins and phenolic compounds. These are naturally antifungal and hydrophobic. Drying oils such as linseed oil, from flax, thin oils that soak deep into wood and then polymerize, harden, by reacting with oxygen, turning from liquid into a solid network inside the fibers. Waxes and fats, beeswax and sometimes animal fat, sometimes mixed with ash or charcoal, which provide a water-repellent but still breathable outer layer. A particularly powerful treatment combines all three. Craftsmen would gently warm pine tar and linseed oil together, sometimes over coals, to reduce viscosity and help them penetrate. Heating also helps drive off excess moisture from the surface of the wood. Applied to warm, dry timber, often with some surface char already in place, the mixture soaks into the outer fibers. The pine tar brings its antifungal chemistry. The linseed oil acts as a carrier, then hardens in situ, physically locking the tar into the wood structure. Once cured, this inner layer is difficult to wash out and remains effective for many years. Over that, a thin layer of beeswax may be rubbed on and buffed. Wax is hydrophobic, shedding liquid water and slowing down wetting, but it is not a plastic film. Under temperature changes and microcracks, it still allows some vapor to pass, meaning the wood can dry out again. This balance, water repellent but vapor permeable, is crucial. Fully sealed but imperfect coatings trap moisture. Breathable armor lets wood dry after getting wet. In some regions, recipes varied. Coastal communities might rely more heavily on thick tar. Inland carpenters might lean on oil and wax. There is scattered evidence of additional steps, like washing with vinegar or dilute lye from wood ash to kill existing spores before the oiling stage. But the principle is consistent. Soak the wood with a penetrating, hardening, naturally toxic cocktail, then give it a renewable, breathable, water-shedding skin. This is not a one-time magic trick. These treatments were renewed. Farmhouse beams and church pews were periodically wiped down with wax or oil as part of routine care, refreshing the outer layer and allowing owners to spot early damage. The result? Of this multi-layer system, maintained over generations, is why some monastery furniture, beams, and church roofs remain sound after centuries of use. Section 7. Designing the house around the wood. Even perfect treatment will fail if you bury wood in a swamp and trap it in plastic. Medieval builders reduced that risk by how they designed homes. One obvious measure is keeping structural wood off the ground. Stone foundations, sill stones, or brick plinths raise beams away from direct soil contact. Instead of a wooden post sitting in mud, you have stone at grade and wood starting a step above, where it dries more easily and fungal pressure is lower. Thick masonry walls, minimal insulation, and the absence of central heating created a surprisingly stable internal climate in many medieval buildings. Temperatures changed slowly, and the walls breathed, allowing moisture to diffuse instead of condensing in cold cavities. That lower swing in temperature and humidity is stressful for comfort, but it is gentle on timber. Another underrated factor is smoke. In some traditional houses and farm buildings, smoke from open hearths or internal chimneys was intentionally allowed to wash over beams and rafters for decades. That smoke carries small amounts of tar, resins, and acidic compounds that slowly darken and impregnate the wood surface. Accounts of very old houses note beams almost lacquered in a shiny black crust of smoke deposits and still mechanically sound. Roofs and eaves were also generous. Deep overhangs protect exterior timber from driving rain. Gutters, or drip edges, where used, help keep water from running down posts. When water does reach the wood, airflow and sun can remove it quickly. In short, the building itself was part of the treatment system. Keep water away. Keep air moving. Avoid trapping moisture with impermeable coatings, and let smoke and time do some of the sealing work for you. Section 8. Why modern solutions fail. If this medieval system worked so well, why did we stop using it? The answer is not that it failed. It is that it did not scale well to an industrial, impatient society. Everything about it clashes with modern incentives. Slow growth, old trees with tight rings versus fast-grown plantation timber. Winter felling and multi-year seasoning versus year-round harvesting and kiln drying in days. Labor-intensive, hot-applied tar and oil mixtures versus quick-dip treatments in large pressure cylinders. Designing buildings to breathe and dry out versus wrapping them in films and foams to maximize energy efficiency and speed of construction. Modern pressure treatment can be effective when done correctly. It uses pressure and vacuum cycles to force chemical preservatives into wood, often with strong biocides that fungi dislike. But industrial economics push toward lower chemical loadings, less durable species, and minimal maintenance. When that treated wood is then installed in a way that traps water, against impermeable membranes, behind non-breathable paints, in poorly ventilated decks, it fails for the same basic reasons raw wood fails: moisture, nutrients, and oxygen in the same place for too long. By contrast, medieval methods rarely relied on a single line of defense. They started by choosing inhospitable wood, dried it slowly to a stable state, fortified it from within with natural chemistry, armored the surface with char and wax, and put it into buildings designed to shed water and breathe. It is that system, not any one trick, that made their homes feel almost immune to rot. Section 9. What you can borrow today. Most people watching this are not about to plant a forest and wait 80 years for perfect oak. So what can a modern, practical person steal from this medieval playbook? Quite a lot. First, choose better wood when you can. For outdoor structural elements, prioritize naturally durable species if available. Certain oaks, cedars, larches, rather than the absolute cheapest, fast-grown softwood. If you can, Look for boards that are mostly heartwood, darker, denser, tighter ringed pieces. Even within the same species stack, your choice makes a difference. Second, give wood a chance to dry before sealing it up. If you're building a deck or exterior trim, store boards stacked with spacers in a dry, airy place for weeks or months before installation. It is not as perfect as multi-year seasoning, but even short extra drying reduces movement and internal moisture. Third, consider adopting a modern version of the tar and oil treatment for exposed or ground-adjacent elements. There are commercially produced pine tar products and traditional recipes that combine pine tar with boiled linseed oil and sometimes a small amount of turpentine to improve penetration. Applied warm to dry wood, especially with a bit of surface char on posts or lower sections, this creates a robust, breathable barrier system without synthetic biocides. Fourth, design like a medieval builder when it comes to water. Keep structural wood out of direct soil contact by using concrete or stone footings and metal post bases where appropriate. Give decks and fences details that shed rather than collect water. Angled tops, drip edges, good drainage under boards. Ensure plenty of airflow around timber, especially where it tends to stay wet. If you must use modern paints or thick sealants, use them where you can monitor and maintain them, and avoid trapping wet ends inside sealed cavities. Finally, copy their mindset. Maintenance is not failure. It is part of the system. Periodically re-oiling exterior wood, cleaning off biofilm, and watching for early signs of damage is the modern equivalent of medieval households rubbing wax into beams or benches. That light, regular attention is how temporary materials quietly become heirlooms. Section 10. A. Different way of thinking about time. When looking at a 700-year-old beam and comparing it to the 10-year lifespan of a pressure-treated deck, it is easy to conclude that medieval wood was simply superior. The truth is more uncomfortable and, in a way, more hopeful. Their wood is still here, not because they had secret mystical formulas, but because they treated time differently. Everything about their approach assumes the project will outlive the people starting it. The forest is chosen decades before felling. The tree is cut in winter and left to dry for years. The first owner expects to maintain it and assumes their children will too. When something cracks, it is repaired, not replaced wholesale. The treatment is not a product you buy in a can. It is a relationship between people, material, and building. Modern life, especially in the building trades, pushes in the opposite direction. Speed, standardization, low upfront cost, and short replacement cycles. When you stand in a medieval hall where the roof beams are older than your country, it is a physical argument for another way of building and thinking. If there is one lesson to take from the old tare, the smoke-blackened rafters, the winter-felled oak, and the slow seasoning sheds, it is this: rot-proof wood is not an accident. It is a decision to select better, move slower, layer defenses, and stay in conversation with your building for as long as it stands. For anyone who is curious, practical, analytical, and just a bit nostalgic, that might be the most powerful medieval treatment of all, the way they treated time itself.